going to be reading from verses from John 12, verses 1 through 11. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It's almost a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. Leave her alone, Jesus said. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but because they wanted to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and would putting their faith in him.
Good morning. Good to see everybody here. I promised Rich that I would put a plug in. As you may have seen, there is a slide. We're going to have a Red Cross blood drive. It is on November 2nd. If you will sign up for that, you can get more information about that in the information desk in the back. It's November 2nd from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. I'll also remind you that today is a luncheon. We will have a lunch together following our Bible classes, and then we will have a devotional. I think Reese Parker is going to be sharing our message with that. And then those of you that have the opportunity and have signed up to be a part of, we have a fall festival tonight from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and I will say a little bit more about that in a moment. I am ready. I thought that was one of the sweetest. Lori and Jerry Lundy gave me a set of engraved handkerchiefs and said, "You use those all the time. I would think that you would, need a gift like that." We're going to be in John chapter 12, and if you want to, if you want to get to Mark 14, we'll be there too. Scott came in. We kind of joke about that in the office. I told Nora and Colleen if they wanted to come in and hear my lesson, I come in and practice. I come kind of work my lesson out and think and talk. And Scott was, I don't even know if Scott's getting to be in here. I think he was going to be in the kids' lessons and stuff. And so he came in here and I told him, I said, the hardest thing for me is to pick lessons that I know I'm going to do this. Because they're important lessons. But I don't like to stand up here and lose it. And so the story, it's just such a cool story. And it's a story that's going to get me going this morning. It's a true story. It's about a 9-year-old boy. There was a bus ministry. I'll get it together. I appreciate all the folks that wore aqua today. There's a lot of aqua. there's a bus ministry. It's a small town in Tennessee. Guy takes over the ministry. He decides, hey, you know what? It'd be good to go ahead on Saturdays to go knock some doors and to go find maybe some kids that have never attended worship before. And so that's what he did. And so one Saturday afternoon, he's knocking doors. He knocks on the door, and a little 9-year-old boy comes to the door. He says, hey, are your parents home? And the little boy says, no, my parents are never home. He says, well, at least not on the weekends. He said, they go away, and they leave me to take care of my little brother. And he says, how old are you? And he says, 9 years old. And he says, they do that every weekend? He says, yes. He says, well, I guess I'll talk to you. He says, I would like to invite you to go to church. And the little boy says, I've never been to church before. What is that? And he says, you know, you've never been to church ever in your life? And the little boy says, no. And he reflects on the fact that the church building is only less than 3 miles away. So he tells the little boy, for the first time, the story of Jesus. And the little boy is intrigued. And if you don't know this about me, this is kind of how we were converted. Except I was 10. Never heard this story. Little boy hears the story, is excited. He says, yes, I want to go to church. The man comes the next day to pick the little boy up, knocks on the door, and nobody's there, and he kind of, knocks louder and checks the doorknob, and sure enough, the door's open. He leans in, and he sees the little boys are asleep, and his little brother and himself. He goes in and helps them get ready and gets them on the bus. They have a donut on the bus, and there's songs on the bus, and there's stories about Jesus on the bus. They get to church. He sits down on about the second or third row with all the other kids, and he's listening, and he's seeing what's happening, and he's clueless. He's never been before. And finally, and this is how the story says it, a few minutes into the service, these tall, unhappy guys walked to the front and picked up some wooden plates. So these tall, unhappy guys start passing the plates. And the little boy has no idea what's going on, but it doesn't take him long to realize, hey, everybody's giving money. And they must be giving money to this Jesus guy. And so he realizes, I don't have anything. And so the plate comes by, and he kind of holds it for a second, and people are looking at him. And he's like, I guess I've got to pass it down. He passes it down, but he's intrigued by this idea that people are giving to Jesus, but he's also upset that he doesn't have anything. And so he watches, and he kind of turns around a few times, and then he thinks, idea. And so he gets up, and the story says in front of God and everyone, and he walks down the aisle, and he tugs on the guy, one of the tall, unhappy guys' coat, and he says, may I hold it again? And he sets it on the carpet, and he steps inside, and he says, God, I don't have anything to give you this morning but me, so I give you me. What does Christ expect from us? To do what we can. To give what we can. To give of ourselves first. This reference, John chapter 12, verses 1 through 11. I don't know if Tim didn't want to. Oh, I know Tim's on vacation, and I'm excited for him. He's coming back tomorrow, and he's getting to worship with Hannah this morning, and I know that's a blessing for him to just be a regular, everyday guy. But he gave me the text, and I was thinking, John 12, and as soon as I read the first verse, I went, I love this text, but I also know it's a very personal text for me because it teaches me a lot. So as we look at John 12, as we look at Mark 14, let's look at some things. Pay attention to a couple things. I'm not going to read it again. You know the story of Mary. But Jesus arrives in Bethany, where Lazarus lives, and they go to eat in this house. And Mark chapter 14 tells us it's not Mary's house, it's not Martha's house, it's not Lazarus' house. It is Simon the leper's house. Okay? And you say, well, what does that matter? Well, it matters a lot because you don't enter into a leper's house unless the leper's been healed. I mean, I don't want to go eat in a leper's house. Would you want to go eat in a leper's house? I mean, it would bring new meaning to the fact that they were serving finger foods if you were in a leper's house. But, you know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? So that would be worrisome, but we're not worried about it because Simon's been healed, okay? And because he's been healed, that's why they're in his house eating dinner, okay? But he has another guest at this luncheon, and Lazarus is there. And as Scott talked about last week, you have Lazarus sitting there at the table as one who has just been raised from the dead. And then you have Simon the leper there as one who's been cured from his leprosy. And I'm sure they're having these one-up stories. I mean, I don't know that, but I would love to have been invited to that dinner. I don't know about you, but having conversation. Jesus is there, Lazarus is there, and Simon is there. And Simon's going, man, I'm whole again. You know, and Lazarus is saying, I got out of a hole. You know, and Jesus is saying, now you're holy. You know, and they're just all of these wonderful stories that are taking place. And then right in the middle of it, you have Mary, who comes to anoint Jesus with this oil, with this nard, this expensive gift. And she comes and she breaks it open. She pours it on his head. What she has left, she pours on his feet. She pulls her hair down and starts washing his feet. Now we know right away that one is not happy with this gift, and so Judas rebukes her. But just as quickly, Jesus honors her. Jesus blesses her for her gift. He actually says to her and to us, I tell you the truth. This is Mark 14, verse 9. I tell you the truth, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her, as it is again today. To be telling the story of Jesus, to be talking about this great gift, we're talking about it today. Mary brought her offering to Jesus because it was precious to her. A year's salary is what Scripture teaches. Now you fill in the blank. What's your year's salary? That's what she gave. Now obviously, if we broke it down into a modern 21st century, you're talking probably around a $15,000 to $20,000 gift. It was extraordinary. It may most likely have been her dowry. It could have been, as some have said. But regardless of what it was or how it was viewed by others, it was a gift that Mary wanted to give because it was precious to her. It's interesting to me when you stop to think that there's three times in Scripture where Mary kind of comes to the forefront, where she's in the spotlight. Okay? One of those stories is found in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. It's the story where she's sitting at the feet of Jesus. Martha is preparing the food for dinner, and Martha says, Lord, do you think you could get Mary to get up from what she's doing there, listening to you, and help me? And Jesus reminds us that she's doing what's right. What is she doing? She's sitting at the feet of Jesus. Okay? She's in the spotlight, sitting in the feet of Jesus. Second story, she kneels at his feet in sorrow over the death of her brother Lazarus. She comes and she says, Lord, she gets down on her knees and to his feet and says, if you had been here, my brother would still be alive. And in this story, 3 times we read of Mary in the spotlight. And all 3 times she's at the feet of Jesus. Not a bad place to be. Not a bad place to be. Maybe we should ask ourselves this morning, have we been there lately? Maybe we've been too proud, too self-reliant, too occupied to be at his feet. But it seems Jesus' feet was Mary's favorite place to be. And in this story, she wants to express her love to Jesus by doing something special. And I have my stars and my highlights and my grab your handkerchief in my notes, because I have to ask the question, could the same be said of us? Could the same be said of me? Because, this is my question. Have we given anything to God recently, not because we were expected to, but because we wanted to? And Scott was in here about this time, and I sat there and cried for him. There he is. And I said, man, I do not want to preach this lesson. And he goes, oh, you got to. And I said, oh, it's driving me nuts. I said, but this bugs me. And he said the same thing. We talked it out. I said, because as ministers, a lot's expected of us. Okay? I expect a lot from myself. To do what I do because that's what I do. And when we go and do things, people say, oh, it's just your job. But you know what? It's important to us, all of us, to do things for God, not because we're expected to, but because we want to. That we reach down and we find some special something to do in our service to God. I expect you to be here for Sunday service. I expect you to be here for Bible class. We expect you to be at certain events. But what have you done lately? Okay, and it's the question that's coming from my heart to you and to me. What have you done lately for Him because you've wanted to? One author wrote this: whenever this kind of love exists in the heart, there is a desire to sacrifice. The object of our devotion is worth every penny. A sacrificial offering, one that honors the Lord, must first of all be something that's dear to us. We oftentimes say, hey, I'm going to donate clothing to the closet, and I've used this illustration before because it just makes sense to me. But, we go through our stuff, and we usually get the stuff that what? That we don't want. And we say, well, I sacrificed today, I gave my clothes. Okay, that's not sacrifice. It didn't cost us anything. Okay, what would be a sacrificial offering would be to say, hey, I'm going to get my favorite shirt or my favorite shoes or my favorite belt, or even me. I have ties. I have a favorite tie. Somebody said that this morning. I've never seen you in a tie before. So I wear them occasionally. But to grab the things that are important to us. But what's most important, as Scott so aptly put, is our hearts. God wants our hearts. He wants them always. I love the passage in 2 Samuel chapter 24. If you remember, David is going to find land where he can build an altar, and then eventually the temple will be there. The owner of the land, Araunah, offers to give him the land. He says, I'll give you the land, I'll give you the offerings, I'll give you whatever you need, free. Free. Okay, for the kids that know that movie. All right? I'll give it to you for free. And David in verse 24 of 2 Samuel 24 writes this, or says this, no. In other words, I'll give it to you. And he says, no, I insist on buying it, for I cannot offer to God that which costs me nothing. So here's King David, okay, right after making a pretty huge mistake in this chapter. He's numbered the people and didn't do what he was supposed to do. All right? And God gets upset with him. And he realizes, man, I've got to make up for this. I need to give to God more. Okay? But he realizes the importance of it costing him something. So let's ask that question of ourselves. What's important to me? What's important to me? What's important to me this morning? Well, let's study our checkbooks. Because where our money goes is sometimes where our interests lie. Jesus said it best when he said, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And he wants our heart, and so let's check our checkbook to see just about where we are in our thoughts about him. What's important to me? Study my calendar. Look at where my time is going. If you want to know what I truly believe and what I'm most committed to, then look at my schedule and see what I'm using my time for. And that's going to tell you a lot about what's important to me. Who's important to me? Who's important to me? Then study my service. Study the things that I'm doing for others. How do I serve other people? That'll tell you a lot about who's important to me. This sacrificial love that Mary gives is pleasant to others. I love this idea that it's a sweet aroma. John 12:3 says, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. It wasn't just those in the room who smelt it. It was the whole house. Maybe those outside. Because an aroma like this tells a lot, smells a lot. When we give ourselves to Jesus, our aroma is powerful. How we live our lives tells more than one or two people in our lives that we care about Jesus. The story's told about a group of missionaries. And these missionaries were all going to China, and so they attend a Chinese language class. It's the very first day of class, and the teacher walks in, doesn't say a word, and walks up the aisle, around the room, circles in between all of the students, never says a word, comes back, does it again, and they're all kind of like, what in the world? So she comes up to the front and says, did you notice anything about me today? Of course, they're thinking, you're wacko because you didn't talk to us. You just walked through us. And finally, one girl goes, you have on a very lovely perfume. And she goes, that's my point exactly. She goes, I smelled good, didn't I? She said, yeah. And they all go, yeah, we smelled that. And she said, you see, if it will be a long time, this is what she says to her class, it will be a long time before any of you will be able to speak Chinese well enough to share the gospel with anyone. But even before you're able to do that, you can minister the sweet fragrance of Christ to these people by the quality of your lives. As you intermingle with the Chinese people, put off a good aroma. Smell good for Jesus. Because Christ to them will be exemplified before you're able to say one word about a personal faith. So what do we smell like? I mean, I'd like to ask that as an entire body. You say, oh, well, we smell pretty good in here. I mean, some of the teenagers automatically, what do you smell like? But what I'm talking about us. What do we smell? We smell great in here, don't we? We always smell great in here because it's easy for us to smell good in here. But what do we smell like to that community? What's our aroma to our community? I mean, we do some wonderful things. New Heights, Colleen and you getting all the folks together to do that all the month here. That's a smell good, okay, to this community. And we do wonderful things with the clothing closet, and we do things with our food pantry. Those are things that we do. And tonight I'm putting in this plug, and Robert, this is the time to put that. We're having a fall festival tonight. Okay? And somebody says, well, why do we do that? It's like because we're a good smell to this community. It is simply to say, hey, we're here and we care about you. We care about your kids. We want you to come have a safe environment. And that's not the best picture ever. It was a great picture when Karen gave it to me, but I had to blow it up to get on the screen, and now it doesn't look so great. Okay? We will have 600 or 700 people from the community here tonight. And we have a chance to make a difference. We have a chance to do this blood drive. I mean, it's a chance to give to others. Do what you can. We need to do what we can. We need to be a great smell. Turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 2, and you say, oh, you're talking about smells. Hey, you know what? It's a biblical concept. Paul used it. It's great. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14 and verse 15. We need, while you're turning there, we need some more candy, more volunteers. If you want a trunk or treat, you know what they do? You just pull your cars up. We've already got like 20 plus people. The kids come by and you just give them candy. You get to talk to them. You can invite them to come to church. You can tell them how cute their costumes are. And then you can say, hey, hope to see you at church next. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can do at the Fall Festival. It's a wonderful time. I appreciate all of you that have already volunteered. 2 Corinthians 2, verses 14 and 15. Paul says, but thanks be to God who always leads us as captives in Christ's triumphal procession and uses us, and here it is, to spread the aroma of the knowledge of Him everywhere. It literally means the smell of Christ. For we are to God the pleasing aroma of Christ among those who are being saved and those who are perishing. It's important for us to smell good this morning. I believe when God's people give the very best that they can give, that aroma is a pleasing aroma, and it draws people to Him. And also, like Mary, we get encouraged, do we not, by sacrifice? Are y'all not encouraged? When you read about something, you don't get to see that very much, do we? You always see all the negative and all the junk. But every once in a while, they do these feel-good stories. I love those feel-good stories. You read about it, and I get encouraged. I get fired up. I get excited about the fact that somebody is sacrificed or they've done something special. And you just go, man, I want to do that. That's exactly what Mary does for us in this gift. And I want to be that person. I want to be that person, as Hebrews says, to spur one another on to love and good works. I want to be an example. I want to say, hey, I want you to see what I do, and I hope that you want people to see what you do and say, I want to do some of that. I love in Mark's account of this event. Mark chapter 14, verse 8, the title of my lesson this morning. Okay? When Jesus is explaining Mary, he says she did what she could. Okay? She did what she could. So, well, I can't do this. Well, do what you can. I can't do what this guy's doing. I can't do what that guy. I couldn't do what Mary did. I don't have the gift of giving. I just don't. It's not my gift. Some of you do. We're sitting in an auditorium as a result of lots of people's gifts, but one huge gift, and that's amazing to me. But there are things that I do well that you don't do well, and there's things that you do well that I don't do well, and that's why it's a body. And we as a body need to come alive and do those things for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ. The fragrance of Mary's perfume has long since evaporated. But Mary's memory survives as long as the gospel is preached. She did what she could, and what she did made a difference. I asked the question right after the story. What does Christ expect of me? To do what I can. To do what I can from a heart of love and an expression that only I can give back to God. Because it's my gift to Him. My life, my gifts are my gifts. Have y'all ever received gifts from your children and they got it from their stuff? I mean, it's not like they can go out and buy it. In a lot of cases, we do that with our kids as they were young. Hey, do you want to buy something for your brother? Yeah, can I go pick it out? Yes. But I've got gifts. Hunter gave me a little armadillo years ago, his favorite little beanie baby. And I knew it was his favorite because he said, this is one of my favorites. I mean, I kind of don't like it, but it's kind of my favorite. And it's in my office. If you come in my office, on my trophy case, I put things on my trophy case that are important to me. It's a little armadillo. Huh? I mean, no, it's an anteater. Sorry. They're both going. No, sorry. It looks like an armadillo. But it is, yeah. It's a long-nosed armadillo. All right? It's an anteater. Sorry, honey. Okay? I added that in my notes. It wasn't in my notes, but I just thought about that. Okay? We just need to give to God what we can. Okay? And we need to make a difference in each and every one of the lives of the people that we touch. Mary treasured Jesus. Did she not? Can you not just see it in what she does? We have glimpses of her life, but she treasured Jesus. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Mary's heart was with Jesus. And may we, like the little boy in the opening illustration, may we be able to say, God, this morning, I give you me. I give you me. If you haven't given Him your life, or you need some help with anything this morning, please come while we stand and while we sing.